Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. What if one of America's two great political parties changed completely and nobody noticed? We don't need to guess. It happened. While the National Press Corps stares transfixed at the president's Twitter feed, the Democratic Party has morphed into something that bears no resemblance to what it was even 10 years ago. For many decades, that party was a coalition of liberal intellectuals, the urban poor, and the country's working class. That last group kept Democrats grounded in the vicinity of reality, but those voters are long gone now, and with them the Democrats' connection to America itself. Consider the party's evolution on the question of borders. Bill Clinton ran twice against illegal immigration. He attacked it in stump speeches and in his State of the Union address. Clinton understood that without borders, you don't have a country. He also knew and repeatedly said that a flood of low-wage labor undermines the wages of American citizens, because it does. Try making that point today. Keith Ellison will denounce you as a Nazi. Ellison is a Democratic congressman from Minnesota. This year, he was nearly elected chairman of the DNC. He's not a fringe character. And yet the other day, he announced that opposing illegal immigration in any way is morally on par with aiding Hitler.
I'm one of the people who believes we should give our neighbors sanctuary. And if you ask yourself, what would I do if I was a Gentile in 1941 if my Jewish neighbors were under attack by the Nazis? Would I give them sanctuary? You might be about to find out what you would do. Will you pass that moral test, or will you fail it?
So if you think we ought to enforce the immigration laws Congress itself passed, Congressman Ellison believes you're evil. When did Democratic politicians start talking like this? Maybe around the time Congresswoman Maxine Waters of Los Angeles became a folk hero on the left. In a recent appearance, Waters explained that the Trump administration isn't simply wrong on the issues, it's a front for the Klan.
I'm cleaning out the White House. This person who does not respect you, this dishonorable human being who cheats everybody, this dishonorable human being who will lie at the drop of a hat, this dishonorable human being who have the alt-right and the KKK and everybody else inside his cabinet. I'm going to say impeach 45 every day. Impeach 45 every day.
That's not political rhetoric. It's a war cry. It's an incitement to hysteria, and maybe worse. If you really thought the Ku Klux Klan controlled the White House, what would you do? What wouldn't you do? We're the adults in the Democratic Party. It used to be they were in leadership, but not anymore. Nancy Pelosi is the most powerful Democrat in the House of Representatives. She was once Speaker, you'll remember. She may soon be again. Pelosi isn't just tolerant of illegal immigration. She's now explicitly encouraging it. Watch this.
The list goes on and on about how we want to advance and protect the Dreamers until we can pass the bill. Their families did a great thing for our country, bring these kids here who are working, who are in the military, who are in school, who are a brilliant part of our future.
Breaking our laws is now a great thing, says one of our country's chief lawmakers. People who ignore the legislation Congress writes should be congratulated for it, says one of Congress's top leaders. That's more than perverse. This is what it looks like when the people in charge of a country decide to destroy it. Their motive? It's always the same. Political power. They lost it, they want it back, even if it means hurting the people they are sworn to protect. Democrats alienated the middle of the country during the Obama years, but they have no plans to convince those voters to return. Instead, they plan to replace them with new and more reliable voters from abroad and damn the consequences for the rest of us. That's why they're far more upset about DACA than they are about the opioid crisis. It's why they care more about preventing a border wall than they do about raising the wages of American workers. It's not complicated. What's amazing is that they're now saying it out loud. Michael Starr Hopkins is a Democratic attorney, a contributor to The Hill and The Huffington Post, and he joins us tonight from New York. Michael, thanks a lot for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tucker.
So it seems like kind of a profound moment where you have the chief lawmaker of one of the two main political parties explicitly encouraging people, congratulating them for breaking the law.
No, that's not what Nancy Pelosi was doing.
Well, she just said it. We just ran the tape. She said what you did was a great thing by breaking the law.
No, she wasn't saying by breaking the law you were doing a great thing. She was saying that by taking a dangerous journey, by trying to make sure that you made the life of your children better, improving the life and the plot of your family, that's an honorable thing to do. Most Americans who came to this country didn't come before 1920, or rather came before 1920, when there weren't immigration laws that are codified like they are now.
Okay, but it's not 1920, it's 2017, and there are immigration laws passed by the Congress over which she presides, and she's congratulating people for breaking a law that her body passed. I mean, you could make the same case. Someone robs a liquor store and you say, boy, you took a lot of risks. There was a security guard there. You had to drive the getaway car at high speed. You still break, I mean, and that may all be true, but you still broke a law. And so for a lawmaker to encourage people to do that, it seems like something very different than I've ever seen before. Do you not perceive that?
One, I wouldn't say that she's encouraging people to break the law. I think she's saying that what they did, the act of coming across the border to ensure the life and the plot of their family, is something that, we should all honor and think about the risks that they were willing to take.
But why? But hold on. Again, you're eliding over the point that I'm making, because I think it's an important one. I'm not attacking DACA recipients. I'm merely saying you have a lawmaker, someone in charge of laying down what is legal and what is not legal in our country, ignoring the fact that these people broke the law that she passed.
But I don't think that she's ignoring that. That's what I'm saying.
But why wouldn't she say, as all politicians have until this moment, look, illegal immigration is wrong. You shouldn't break the law to get here. But, you're hardworking people or whatever. But she doesn't even say that. The party doesn't even say that anymore. They're openly encouraging it.
Clip of what she said during the press conference.
No, you can watch the whole thing. When was the last time? Okay, but I did watch it, and she didn't say that. And you're seeing again and again, I can spend a whole hour playing tape for you, Democrats applauding people for breaking immigration law.
That's not what they're applauding. Democrats are not applauding people for breaking the law. What we're saying is this is a country of immigrants. We are all here because someone came from somewhere else, and that the idea that people would risk their lives for a better life is at the essence of what we are as a people, at the essence of what we are as a country. So that's more important. So, but again, what about the law? I mean, I'm not just being, look, it's not just me. I'm just a talk show host. This is a lawmaker. This is someone whose whole job it is. Right now, we're debating the law. We're debating the DREAM Act and how we can go about fixing these laws, because right now, our system is broken. And I think that's something Democrats and Republicans
But you
agree.
could say that, but I think everyone agrees our tax code is broken. And all of us have opinions about the ways in which it's broken. How would you feel if a member of Congress got up and said to people who are facing charges for tax evasion, you did a great thing. I support what you did. It was brave what you did. You wanted to feed your family, so you didn't pay those taxes. Wouldn't you say, well, wait, hold on a minute. Our tax code's rotten, but like you can't. My point, it's not a false equivalency. It's what we just were watching.
A financial law versus someone endangering their life for their family, those are two different things.
Oh, really? Because I have a family, and I can promise you that financial, economic concerns are the main concerns. How am I going to feed these people? How am I going to pay for this house? They got to go to school. You want to go to summer camp? It's expensive. Like, these are the core questions people face, and they revolve around the tax code. These are American citizens. Wouldn't you say, I know I would say, if I saw the Speaker of the House say, you know what, if you don't like the tax laws, just ignore them. I would say, whoa, the system's going to fall apart if you do that. You don't see this at all?
But what we're doing here is focusing on 10 seconds of Nancy Pelosi's comments today, instead of focusing on the grander issue, which is, what are we going to do about DACA? What are we going to do about the DREAM Act? How are we going to ensure that these 800,000 people are brought into the American experience, brought out of the shadows?
Well, I don't know. Maybe some of us think they shouldn't be part of the American experience. I have a right to think that. And when you start framing things as a battle between good and evil, anyone who disagrees with me, no, not at all. No, I believe in the law. I'm an American, like the whole world.
And the only reason Democrats were doing this was because we wanted their votes.
When you have someone, but let's be totally honest here. Yeah. If you have someone saying the cabinet of the United States government is controlled by the Ku Klux Klan, if I really thought that, I think I would quit my job and work full-time to overthrow that group.
Steve Bannon was in the White House, and he said himself he was an ally of the alt-right.
Of the Klan? Like, what? I mean, let's like drop the pretense. That's insane, it's untrue, and it's inciting people to lunacy. You can't say that. It's just not true. Well, she's a member of Congress. You're not allowed to talk like that.
Where's the consistency? Donald Trump says ridiculous thing after ridiculous thing, and you don't care whether it's true. Now, all of a sudden...
Actually, I do care whether it's true, and if Trump ever says that some group he doesn't like is controlled by the Klan, I'd say, you know, well, slow down, man.
She said that Obama was the founder of ISIS and that he was a Kenyan. Come on. I mean, I get where you're coming from.
That he was the founder of ISIS and a Kenyan. Both untrue. But you have a sitting member of Congress who's like a folk. I mean, I guess is the point you're making that it's okay now? I mean, what's the point that you're making?
My point is that I would appreciate consistency on both sides.
So as long as Trump says things you don't like, then it empowers people like Maxine Waters to, like, say totally insane things like that? Is that the standard?
Well, there's a Maxine Waters comment about the Ku Klux Klan and alt-right being in the White House. I think that that's actually a legitimate conversation that we should be having, because Donald Trump has surrounded himself with people who I think Democrats should be scared of. I think Republicans should be scared of. People who have tendencies to not only cite Breitbart in alt-right literature, but also echo some of the tones. I mean, I'm glad
I mean, look, the stuff you disagree with, but I read Breitbart. I know most people who work over there. There's no Klans. I mean, the Klan is like, that's just way over the line, in my opinion.
I think the Klan has become kind of like Kleenex. It's a generic term that we use for...
I think it's totally crazy, and when we get civil nuttiness, we can point to people like that and say that's why, in my view. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Tucker, thanks for having me.
Mark Steyn is, technically speaking, a foreigner of sorts, but he cares more about Americans' well-being than most of its politicians here in this country, and so we're always proud to have him on our show. What do you think the long-term effect, Mark, is of having politicians, people who are like holding elected office, saying things that are so over the top and so designed to terrify people, and no one calls them on it? What do you think long-term is going to happen if that continues?
Yeah, well, just to go back to me being a foreigner, Tucker, I'm a legal immigrant, which means I'm a non-dreamer, which means nobody sentimentalizes me. I listened to that rhapsody that Michael was doing about these people taking their children on a brave journey, struggling across to give them a better. Nobody ever says that about me and my kids. We're the non-dreamers. Because we did the boring thing and filled in the paperwork. And what that does, that kind of language, is it actually prevents politics. Politics is about public policy. When you first sentimentalize it, and then you take it to the next stage, as Keith Ellison does, where if you disagree on a rather boring public policy point, you're a Nazi. If you take it to the level that these other Democrats do, where we've just heard someone explain that there are Klansmen now in the cabinet. This is absurd. And also, it's decadent. During the Bush years, college professors in liberal latte towns drove around with bumper stickers saying, "Bush scares me." And then they parked the car that says, "Bush scares me," and they got out of the little college espresso house and they had a soy macchiato and watched the world go by. Nobody in Saddam Hussein's Iraq was driving around with a bumper sticker saying, "Saddam scares me." This is a form of decadence that is actually insulting to people who live in uncivilized societies.
It's the banality of symbolic protest by our privileged class, for sure. So there was an interesting moment, I thought, on the Ellen show. Haven't watched a lot of Ellen, but she was asked, essentially, would you have Donald Trump on your show? And here's what she said.
Would you have him on your show?
Definitely. I mean, I would not say no to the sitting president of the United States.
Really?
Absolutely not. Would you?
Yeah.
You would?
Yeah. I can't have someone that I feel is not only dangerous for the country and for me personally as a gay woman, but as to the world.
I guess what got me about this, look, she doesn't have to like Trump, I get it, but the idea that going on her show would make him the real president for the first time ever, and that she fears that suggests a kind of megalomania that, like, I guess is normal there.
Yeah, and for a start, the investment in this narrative is absurd. Trump is no threat to her, quote, as a gay woman, unquote.
Well, that's true.
He's lived in New York all his life. He doesn't care about gays. He comes out of Trump Tower and they're crawling all over the town. He's happy to let Caitlyn Jenner use whatever bathroom in Trump Tower tickles her fancy. He doesn't care about any of that. And we know that. He's not like, you know, some uptight redneck Southern congressman from the 1960s. But what this does is it makes politics impossible, because it says this isn't a boring, stable society of representative self-government where the pendulum swings every 4 years and your guy wins or your guy loses, and next time round you find a better candidate than the last atrocious candidate, and this time you're back in. It's saying that we are actually in revolutionary conditions, and that's a really dangerous path to go down.
Where does that end?
Well, I think it ends by becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. Keith Ellison, if he seriously believes, I mean, for a start, he's not serious. When he says that the DACA dreamers are the equivalent of Jews in Nazi Germany, he's not meaning they should move in with him. Nancy Pelosi, who seemed to be getting on with all those dreamers shouting her down the other day, Nancy has a pretty big spread out in San Francisco. If they want to move in with her, that's a compromise we can all agree on. But actually, housing a Jewish family in your attic. I was talking to a guy in Hungary. This was a dangerous thing to do. He was taken in by he was a Jewish boy taken in at the end of the Second World War. And that family saved his life, because at that time the regime in Budapest was running out of bullets. So they tied the Jews together, stood them in the Danube, shot the one at the left end, the one at the right end, and everyone in between sank with them and drowned. And it's disgusting to people who know the difference between real totalitarianism and this sort of showbiz pose. This Bush scares me, Trump scares me. John Kasich would scare them. Jeb Bush would scare them. This is decadence. You know, well, Lindsey Graham would scare them. Susan Collins would scare them. It's fake and it's rubbish, and they should be ashamed of appropriating a real fascist experience in order to get their jollies from it.
Yeah.
Go back to your soy macchiato and your bumper stickers.
To be fair, John Kasich does scare me a little bit, but I get it. Mark, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Tucker.
Thank you. Hurricane Maria slammed into Puerto Rico today. We've got an update on the damage, which is profound. That's next. Plus, President Trump may have been right about President Obama wiretapping Trump Tower. Kind of a big deal. Nobody seems interested in following up on it, though. Why? That's ahead. This is a Fox News alert. Hurricane Maria has slammed into the island of Puerto Rico, adding its own destructive toll to an island wounded just 2 weeks ago by another hurricane, Hurricane Irma. Steve Harrigan is in San Juan, the intrepid Steve Harrigan, and he joins us from there now. Steve, what's it like?
Tucker, the worst of the winds have already gone through Puerto Rico, but the problem now and the danger is from the rain. It hasn't stopped from yesterday afternoon. It's still coming down pretty hard. Some areas could get 20 to 25 inches of rain, so there are flash flood warnings around rivers all across the island. The winds hit hardest around 9 or 10 a.m. They were intense. Here where I'm standing, there were gusts of 145 miles per hour. Big chunks of the buildings around me simply litter the courtyard. Satellite dishes, parts of roofs, balconies, all torn off. Some smaller communities with a lot of wooden buildings, metal roofs, they might have to be rebuilt entirely. The power on the entire island, 3.5 million people here, a U.S. territory, almost completely gone. There's some generator lights on behind me. This is a first responder hotel. It was pounded pretty hard. There is a curfew in effect now from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So far, there have been no reports of looting. This island was hit hard by Irma, a glancing blow. This hurricane was a direct hit, so we could see cleanup and getting the power back on taking months. Tucker, back to you.
Ooh, that sounds awful. Steve Harrigan in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Thank you. Curt Schilling is, of course, a former Major League Baseball pitcher, one of the best. He recently organized a relief effort called Operation Bullpen. It's designed to help the victims of all the hurricanes we've seen recently, Harvey, Irma, and now Hurricane Maria. Curt Schilling joins us tonight. Curt, thanks a lot for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me, Tucker. Appreciate it. Just before we start, I got to tell you, I'm a huge fan. Huge fan.
I'm a fan of yours. I don't embarrass myself, but thank you. Thanks for doing this.
No, I said that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So how exactly are you helping the victims of these hurricanes?
Well, we were able to get on the ground. One of the things I realized, Tucker, from a timing perspective, is about 48 to 72 hours after something like this hits in the mainland, Red Cross and FEMA are set up with food and water, more food and water than Texas or Florida is going to need. But that first 72 hours, that first 48 to 72 hours, there's a lot of chaos. Puerto Rico is going to be very different. And you said that this is an entire country that has no power. And when you start thinking about, drill down to the essentials, there are diabetics whose insulin needs to be refrigerated. There are people on medication that has to be refrigerated. They have no power.
Yes.
Half of this country is probably sleeping out in the open. And they're sleeping in toxic water because it's mixed with sewage and garbage and all the things that do that. So we're gonna hop on a plane here this weekend and head down there with the group. These guys are called the Flip Flop Flotilla, they're all former Special Forces guys, former servicemen, former law enforcement officers who have reached out to be a part of this, and we're excited to get down there and try and make a difference.
That's amazing. So we've got a picture up right next to you of a C-130, I think. Is that the aircraft you're taking down there?
That's a DC-8. That's one of the jets that's going down. The issue right now is cost. It's about $10,000, $10,500 an hour to fly one of these planes.
Yeah.
So we're working to get donations as well to cover the cost for the pilots and the mechanics.
Interesting. So a lot of these charities, I know this was a big issue after Haiti, people send a ton of money in, you don't really know where it goes. You're saying that 100 cents on the dollar is going to aid.
So what I did, and this is very simple. I look at this as a very conservative thing. I have a PayPal account. We took in about $119,000 for Texas and Florida, and we gave out right around close to $140,000. If people are questioning or morally or ethically have an issue with donating to my PayPal account, don't write a check. I don't want to. I'm not going to deal with it. I don't want to give it to Red Cross or FEMA or whoever you feel like giving it to. Don't give it to me.
Interesting. Wow. So when are you leaving? On this weekend?
We're leaving when they let us leave. Obviously there's massive destruction. One of the things that you have to do in this scenario is be fully prepared to be self-sustaining. You don't want to go there and draw on any resources, and you don't want to be in the way, and you don't want to become a rescuer yourself. So we're going to stage out of a couple different places that we know of, and we'll do so as soon as we can get clearance from air traffic control.
We've got details on all of this on our Facebook page. I can't let you leave without asking a political question because it's burning me up. You used to work at ESPN. There's been a lot of drama there over recently about the internal politics of that company. What do you make of it all? There's Jamil Hill.
Well, let me just say, my friends aside, I still have some friends that work there who I love dearly. Yep. This is no surprise. This is a group like everybody. Listen, one thing we know, Tucker, and we've come to know, the left is about your race, your sex, your sexual preference, your identity, who you worship, who you don't worship, who you want to sleep with, whether you're in transit. They're all about identity politics. Every decision they make, every chaos, every event they create is around one of those factors, if not more. The right, we're about legal and illegal. Is it lawful? Are you a law-abiding citizen? I don't care what color you are. If you're a law-abiding citizen, I'm okay with that. If you're not, I'm not.
Interesting. So you're not surprised at all by what you've seen come out of ESPN.
We were like one of those secret like Hogwarts clubs in ESPN when behind the scenes that people would walk up to me and look in my ear and say, "Hey, listen, I'm with you on your politics." Like you were afraid to be found out, and but the only issue that I get, listen, my First Amendment rights weren't abridged. I got to say what I wanted to say, but I work for somebody else and they get to make the rules. They're an openly intolerant, liberal, progressive, bigoted group of people who my biggest beef with it is that they refuse to admit it. I don't care that they aren't.
That's exactly right. MSNBC, just be honest about it. I agree completely. Chris Schilling, thank you for that. It was great to see you tonight. And
thank you, Tucker.
And thanks for what you're doing for Puerto Rico.
Thank you.
Well, Texas says you're only allowed to vote if you can prove you're who you say you are. Up next, we'll talk to a member of a progressive group who says that law is actually bigoted somehow. She'll explain. Stay tuned. This is a Fox News alert. At least 200 people in Mexico have died following a severe earthquake that hit Mexico City, the capital, and areas south of it. On Tuesday, emergency workers scrambled today to save children from a collapsed elementary school, working in silence so they could hear any muffled cries for help. Really tough story. Sadly, 21 children did not make it. President Trump held a lengthy phone call with the Mexican president, offering his support to the people of that country. We'll keep you updated on the damage there. Well, there's a showdown over voter ID laws in the state of Texas. In order to prevent voter fraud, that state recently passed a bill that would bar anyone without some form of photo ID from voting in the elections there. Progressive groups have sued. A district court judge has blocked the law, saying it was racially discriminatory. An appeals court has just reversed that ruling, though, clearing the way for Texans to use the law in the elections next year. Kristen Clark works for the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, and she joins us now. Kristen, thanks a lot for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So one of the reasons I want to talk to you is I reject the underlying, because I think it's not factually supported, assumption of this conversation, which is that there are millions of Americans without photo IDs. I think it would be almost impossible to live in this country without a photo ID. You could not work. You could not get government benefits. You couldn't drive. You couldn't stay in a hotel. You could not buy cold medicine or nail polish in a lot of places. You could not fly on an airplane. I don't know how you could live, and I don't think there's any up-to-date study that shows that those numbers are real.
So let's talk about Texas's photo ID law, which is the most restrictive and stringent law of its kind on the books in the country. Now, this is not a state that said, bring any photo ID to the polls and you can vote. This is a state that has limited voting to people who have certain forms of ID, a passport, a driver's license, a conceal and carry permit. The problem is that there are
same forms of ID that you would need to do any of the things I just listed.
No, the problem is that there are 4.5% of people in Texas, that white voters, black voters, Latino voters, who were disenfranchised the moment that they put this law on the books. And so that's why we filed our Voting Rights Act case.
Let me ask you a question, though. I don't think those numbers are not real, and that's why I wanted to talk to you tonight. I don't think the study shows that. And I know everyone repeats it like it's real. It's not real. Those people cannot make money or get money from the government or drive a car or do anything in American life. And you say 4.5% of the population of Texas can't get any income at all? Like, how does that work?
600,000 people who were disenfranchised the moment they put this law on the books.
But it's a very simple question. If you're an adult in the state of Texas and you don't have a government photo ID, you can't have a job, and you can't get any benefits. You can't participate in any meaningful way in our life. I don't know how you feed yourself. So what are these people doing?
So 5 courts up at this point have found this law to be discriminatory. 5 courts have found it to be discriminatory.
I keep hearing this.
One of the experts that we introduced in the court is Dr. Stephen Ansel-Lebert, and I have a copy of his report for you. What he did was he looked at the election administration database, and he looked at the state and federal ID databases and cross-compared and found that there were 600,000 people in Texas who were registered but didn't have one of the limited forms of ID that are required.
They may not have had them with them, which is very different from not having them. You can go home and get it. But you're ignoring my question, which is, are there really millions of people who don't have photo ID? And you know the answer is no, there aren't, because there can't be.
There are 600,000 people who don't have a conceal and carry permit or passport
people have a driver's license or a passport, or else they can't live in this country. So here's my question. Is it racist to require a photo ID to get a job or stay in a hotel or buy a gun or fly on a plane?
No.
So why is it racist to ask when you vote?
The right to vote is the most important right in our democracy. And we don't need to erect hurdles and barriers that make it harder for ordinary Americans to vote. And what Texas's law did was it knocked out people on the margins, the poorest.
There's no evidence of that. And in fact, you've seen in a number of states, 2 cycles ago, when Obama was elected, you saw a couple of states pass voter ID laws, and the voter participation rate among minority voters went up.
But Texas is a different story. Well, this is a state where courts have found that state officials are acting with discriminatory intent. Whether we're talking about redistricting or the photo ID law.
All of this is predicated on the idea that there are huge numbers of people without government photo ID. And we would at least concede that that's insulting to our intelligence. They don't actually exist because you can't live in America if you don't have government-issued photo ID.
Sadly, 4.5%, this is not a made-up number.
It is
4.5% of people in Texas function without a passport or a driver's license.
No, okay, now you're being too specific. Without government photo ID, How do you live? How do you get money? How do you get food? How do you go outside?
That's why we That's why we've been fighting this voting rights battle for the last 3 years, and we've been winning.
What about the Second Amendment guarantees your right to have arms? Do you think it's bigoted to require photo ID?
Well, this case is not about the Second Amendment. It's about the right to vote. It's about the right to vote.
Those numbers are
and
untrue.
Taking down the barriers that stand in the way of ordinary Americans who want to have their voices heard.
None of that's true. I appreciate it. I just disagree with the premise. This week brought out new evidence the Obama administration may have deliberately spied on Donald Trump's presidential campaign. CNN is reporting that. Why aren't the media treating it like the big deal it is? We'll talk to a Wall Street Journal editor about that next. New reports this week indicate the Obama administration may indeed have spied on the Trump campaign, specifically its campaign chairman Paul Manafort, and possibly monitored Trump Tower while refusing to tell Congress about it. And yet somehow this report, which appears to be kind of a big deal, doesn't seem to have sparked much interest in the press. James Freeman is an assistant editor at the Wall Street Journal. He wrote a piece asking why the media care more about President Trump's tweets than it does about the Obama administration possibly lying and spying on the political opposition. James Freeman joins us tonight. James, thanks a lot for coming on.
Good to be here.
I mean, I guess just the first macro question, this seems like kind of a big deal, an administration authorizing spying on, wiretapping of its political opponents. I mean, if that's not a scandal, I'm not sure what qualifies as one.
Yeah, Tucker, you think about all of the years after 9/11 when we had these huge debates about this awesome surveillance power that we've given the federal government, and obviously that was targeting non-U.S. persons operating overseas. And this question was, what if this amazing power was someday turned on the political adversaries of the party in power? And now it's happened. And everyone seems satisfied that it must have been, I don't want to say everyone, but yeah, much of the media is more concerned with how President Trump is tweeting about it than on the fact that the government...
Can I say one thing? Do you remember that? I mean, you remember that debate. Do you remember the response? If you raised your hand and said exactly what you just said, well, wait a second, what if the government turns this power on its internal opponents? Do you remember the response you got from people? Like, you're crazy.
Yeah, but that was the nightmare scenario.
Exactly.
And you remember all the coverage, debates about what's known as the FISA court, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court. And to much of the media, this is a dark, secretive threat to our civil liberties. Now we learn of a FISA warrant to tap Paul Manafort's phone, and everybody in the media just kind of shrugs and says, well, he must have done something bad. I guess we'll learn eventually. And I think now you're wondering, that judge about a year ago signed off, is he wondering where's the evidence?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. And here, just my final question, why can't we find out more about this? I mean, look, leaking the existence of a FISA warrant, I think, is a felony already. So we're already down this path. Don't you think as citizens we have a right to know why the government did this, who authorized it?
I think we ought to know who authorized it. I think it is kind of odd. Here we are more than a year into this story, and all it's leaked. It's sort of everything except the evidence that there was collusion to rig the election.
It sure seems that way. It seems a bigger threat than Russia. Anyway, James, thank you. There was a great piece today. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it.
Colin Kaepernick isn't the only one protesting the national anthem. Now even 8-year-olds are doing it. We'll discuss what it means for the country, because it does mean something for the country. Stay tuned. Protests against the national anthem aren't just going on in the NFL. Just this past weekend, a 25-person team of Pee-wee football players in St. Louis, all 8 years old or younger, kneeled and faced away from the American flag during the national anthem. It's one of those stories that you may have sort of noticed, but it raises some pretty interesting questions about America today. First and most obviously, there's no way these 8-year-olds decided to do this by themselves. 8-year-olds are not that political. So who is using them to make a political statement like that? Adults. And that's, of course, wrong, just like those videos of kids swearing at Donald Trump were wrong. Really keep the kids out of it. What message are the adults sending, by the way? They aren't actually saying anything specific about police brutality or any other issue. These kids are being used to attack a symbol of the country itself. The point they're making, or the adults behind all this are making, is that America is illegitimate. And if that's what they're learning when they grow up, why will they care about this country, about defending it in war, for example, or paying taxes or following the law? Why would you do any of those things if the country is illegitimate? And what does that mean for our future? These kids are the future, just like those loopy college kids you see on the show once in a while. What's this country going to be like in 30 years when they're in control and have been taught all this nonsense? It's terrifying. Freddie Mitchell once played for the Philadelphia Eagles. He joins us tonight. Freddie, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks, Tuck. It's good to be here.
Thank you. So just to be clear, it goes without saying that I think any American citizen has a right to protest his government. So, I mean, I'm sure you can say it, and I agree with you 100%. If you've got a problem with a specific case of what you think is police brutality, I'm all ears. I think most people are. But these kids weren't being told by their adults to make that case. They were told to basically attack a symbol of the United States itself. And I don't know why you would ever tell kids to do that. Why would you?
Well, you know, the thing about it is you see and you ask with these guys, why are you standing? Why are you kneeling?
Right.
And the impression that African Americans and other color races are getting in America, it's bad. And America, I think, it can be great again if you stop the racial profiling, if you stop a lot of things that's happening in America, and really stand for it. We can both stand now.
It just seems like an overstatement, and I understand people are upset about specific cases where people are killed by the police.
But Tucker, you can never understand. You can never understand because
well, actually, I can understand because I am an American. Okay, whatever.
Tucker,
I'm an American. Hey, slow down.
You can
I'm an American, and I have don't pull that crap on me. I'm telling you, I understand that some things are upsetting.
You can understand that, but I live it though, and that's the problem that they're having. These kids, they live this. Their parents go to them, letting them understand what's going on in America today. They live this life, even though they're 8 years old.
Look, they have a right to be upset about that or whatever else they want to be upset about, but they're making a statement, and you just said it, that the country itself is rotten. And if that's true, then why are millions of people from around the world, including Africa, trying to get here right now? It just seems like stupid and decadent to tell little kids the country's rotten.
First of all, I'm not saying all the country is rotten. If you go and you look at Charleston and everything else, they're black, they're whites, and there's all kinds of races fighting for freedom and equality. You know, it's not just the whole country.
You're right.
So don't
You're exactly right.
So don't pin it. But you said the whole country. It's not the whole country.
Then why are you mocking the look? Why not just get specific and say I'm mad about it? Why attack the flag? Why attack the flag? That's the point I'm saying. It's a symbolic attack on the country. What else is it?
Well, I don't think it's a symbolic attack on the country. I think that it's bringing awareness to what this country is doing, and they're not, they're not stating what they are. It's basically fake news.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but let's go back to a question. It's a sincere question that I asked a minute ago.
Yes, sir.
The country's got problems. I wouldn't deny it. We do a whole show on it every night. But around the world, people of different languages, cultures, races want to come here. If this country is so unwelcoming to non-white people, then why are all these people trying to get here who are non-white?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, because you sell the American dream. Everybody thinks it's the American dream. That's what you sell. I mean, that's what it is. And,
what do you mean you sell?
If you ask,
I don't understand. You mean I'm selling it, or who's selling it?
Well, everybody in America sells that this is such a great place to be. I mean, that's just an American dream. That's a phrase. Being brought up in all these racial things, tensions and stuff like that. It's hard. It's hard to live here, and I don't think of millions and millions of people want to stay where they're at too.
Okay, so would you say to immigrants moving here from Ghana or Ethiopia, and there are a ton here in D.C., would you say don't come here?
America's a great place. I say if you can get here legally, come here. It's a great place.
Why would they want to come here? You just said it's a really tough place to live.
But understand, it's not just colored people. You have Russians. You have a lot of people that want to be here.
I agree. But I'm just saying. Look,
but know what you're getting into, because I mean it's racial profiling. I remember a movie that I was watching. It was Walking While Black. If you're an African American, understand that you're going to be oppressed.
Okay. Do you think the Africans who come here will be oppressed too?
Absolutely. It's racial profiling.
Then why do they keep coming here? I'm just confused.
You would have to ask them. You would have to ask them. But I mean, I'm not saying I love my country. I love America. I love the veterans that fought for my freedom and for me to be able to have this freedom of speech. But at the end of the day, there is something that needs to be done with all this racial inequality.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are lots of things to improve about the country. I think that's one of them. But when you turn your back on the flag, in effect, give the finger to the flag. What do you think the veterans you claim to love so much think of that?
Who's giving the finger to the flag?
No, you turn your back on the flag. What's the point of that?
That could symbolize a lot of things. That could symbolize that they feel that America has turned their back to them. I mean, I don't know what's going on with this group, but down there in them wards and parishes, Louisiana is real, and it have a lot of shootings and a lot of racial profiling that's happened there.
All right, Freddie, thanks a lot for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Well, that hour seemed to pass in mere seconds. We're out of time. Tomorrow night, The Good Show will be talking to actor and director Rob Reiner. He and other Hollywood liberals are teaming up with the Hawk Lobby, the foreign policy hawks here in D.C. They say we're at war with Russia. Holy smokes, prepare for that. 8 o'clock tomorrow night and every night, the show that's the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. DVR it if you haven't already, if you can figure it out. Good night from Washington. The 5 is next. See you tomorrow.